And today I'm going to talk about Batman and the road to his success in the late 80s and 90s, right? So you say, I already know what happened. The Batman movie came out, and before that, The Dark Knight came out. There was a ton of other special projects, The Killing Joke, The Legends of the Dark Knight, The Cult. I'm pretty sure there's a bunch of stuff more than that. We just assume that the Dark Knight in year one happened and Batman became a huge success, right? And that was it. It was back on track. But I want to give you a little assessment of where the books were before The Dark Knight came and where the books were after. Here's a look at, this is possibly a year before The Dark Knight. And we have Paul Gulacy and Doug Moench with a classic team. Now, Doug Moench was the main writer on Batman, the Batman title, right? So we have Doug, we have this classic team from the Master of Kung Fu, right? So I'm just gonna give you a quick look into this, right? And it's their classic sort of storytelling, realism, and noir, right? So did Batman need a refresh? Yeah, of course it did. Of course it needed a refresh, but at the same time, we see with this art, we have this classic team. And I'm just going to go through some of the artists that were here at this time, because this is a two-parter. Is this a two-parter? I'll pull up the wrong one. It's a two-parter with Gulacy, and even Batman gets his head chopped off, so that's another surprise. Right, but this is a really great team, and I showed you this, which is Tom Mandrake, right? And he seems to do a nice, somewhere between Walter Simonson and a little bit of Marshall Rogers, with sometimes you see slickness. Here's a good place to start, right? This is a nice cover, right? So this is late 86. We even have Harvey Bullock in there. They already have him. And it's a little stylized, but it's nice sort of stuff here. So Tom Mandrake could go on to do a bunch of other stuff, but I think his art on Batman is noted. He also did a decent muscular type Batman. And they also had, this is because editor Lean Wen was on this, they had Batman 400, which was kind of ushering and saying a whole new direction on Batman. And not only is this anniversary for Batman, they also have all of these artists on this story by Doug Moench with an introduction by Stephen King. This was a favorite book at the same time in the comics. I think, I don't know how many Batman comics at the comic store was being highlighted as one of the hot ones, but this was definitely a hot book, right? And it had a lot of Marvel talent on it too at the same time. So at the same time, on its older brother book, right? We had, that's not pleading my case. Okay, we had this nice cover by Dick Giordano, right? But I think this is Nocturna. So this one, I think we have Gene Colan doing the art, and he's a mood, sometimes noir type artist. We have a classic team. Doug Moench is writing this, but Lee Wen's the editor. Right, then some classic Gene Colan art, right? And Harvey Bullock. So same sort of, playing with the same sort of cast. And here's a good, since we showed Two-Face in the other thing. So Doug Moench is doing this, and we have this nice cover of destroying a statue of Batman, right? But we have these Robin scenes. So, and Gene Colan is very, I guess his art is very loose. And Bob Smith's a good inker, but he's not necessarily fixing anything, but it's still fun stuff, right? And Gene Colan was a favorite, even though in the comic press it's kind of being taken down by a lot of his peers because some of the weaknesses in art. And I wanted to show this, but why did I have this other one? Oh, that one doesn't have it. So this one, they have a Harlan Ellison tale. This is a really fun Batman story. The Night of Thanks But No Thanks, right? So this one, even though it's cynical, it's still a fun sort of issue, right? And I can see the looseness in the art. And this is a crossover. Like, in my mind, I didn't understand why DC didn't get Klaus Jensen to do Batman regularly. Now, I like the talent that they had when I came over to Detective, but I felt it was a no-brainer since this was Klaus Jensen was a part of the Frank Miller and Daredevil team, and so we have him do Batman. Like, look at this sort of art. He's been inking on the title. They let him draw a couple issues, but at the same time, I felt he should have been picked up. But at the same time, he goes over to Marvel and he does the Punisher for like 6 issues, and it's the hottest book out. They already knew the miniseries was hot, so I feel like they could have. But I think this is Denny's. But this is Denny's first issue, so this almost has the feel of a Daredevil thing, which is what you want, right? It's like this is Klaus giving you that finishing that we got in Daredevil, but at the same time, he draws Batman extra bulky, which we would see in the Dark Knight, right? But I don't know why. He does some great stuff during this period. Batman is almost supernaturally muscular. So with that said, what came in was the Dark Knight, and DC. I think Howard Chaykin said DC wasn't really too big on that. It didn't know it was going to do numbers because there was some buzz for Ronin, but it kind of died out, and the back issue sales didn't show that this book was a hot book anymore. So it was kind of forgotten. But then when he did the Dark Knight, people just went crazy for it, right? And at the same time, they wanted to do another prestige format, which of course was year one, right? Let's see. Yeah, Denny O'Neil, I think, came in on 401, right? So we have this classic story that everyone knows with Dave Mazzucchelli, right? And it's a gorgeous book, great story about Gordon. It does kind of retcon a lot of stuff, but at this point, if you're reading a regular book, it should lead you right into the next stuff, right? Now, they already had Max Allan Collins, who's like a detective guy, who's already doing indie detective books. He was going to be taking over after Frank Miller was gone. So with that said, who's going to be taking over the Batman books after this, right? So Denny says there was a bunch of people, as I told you. They had talking about Marshall Rogers. They're talking about Michael Golden. Was there any other that I listed? But I did a video on it. I know those two. And ultimately, the artists they got in the Batman New Adventures. Now, they said that it wasn't a retcon, but we have a Jason Todd who's younger. Jason Todd had like light, either reddish hair, and he put on like a dark wig to fight crime as Robin. They totally retconned Batman, and James Todd's Jason. Sorry, they totally here. So here is Batman: The New Adventures, right? And these new adventures will be a retcon of the entire thing. And those retcons in year one. Now we have a Jason Todd who has dark hair. Jason Todd had orange hair and he wore a dark wig. And we have him stealing the tire off the Batmobile, a joke that we've heard 3 million times, right? And the artist that I said, Max Allan Collins is the writer, who's a detective writer, and Chris Warner is the artist, right? And Mike DiCarlo is the inker, right? So in looking at this art, I was kind of like, I can see some things, but I know Mike DiCarlo is pretty heavy. So I was wondering if this guy was actually good, but I could see things and I couldn't see things. So I was kind of wondering if this was going to be good. But then they had Dick Grayson as Robin again, so I wasn't sure what was happening, right? So you can see that it's good, but I wasn't really keen on Mike the right? So, but I was like, I want to see how this plays out. Look that he does Decent Babes, right? And then this is the scene I really liked. I was going in here, I was kind of iffy. I didn't understand why it was retconned when they said they weren't going to retcon it. And then we had this Bruce Wayne scene where he sees the crime happen. He goes to stop it. He takes out most of these guys. And he realized he went too far, but he got the wallet. So he acted as if he was hurt, but then it's a great kind of Bruce Wayne scene because most of the time I always feel that Batman would give up his identity, and any hero would, right? So then we get the Moss Guns thing. This is the connect to Jason Todd and his darker sort of thing. So giving Jason Todd kind of a noir type of thing where he was going to go to like I guess not really a halfway house, but a halfway house for like boys. And the Batmobile kind of like the 70s Batmobile, right? We get a hint of the origin, right? I thought this was maybe Leslie Tompkins kind of story, but it's not. My gun is different, and we have the Batmobile. Steal the tire. We see this criminal coming, and he's a little Spitfire, and Batman comes in there. He directs him back to my gun school, but it's actually some criminals. Now, nobody knows why Chris Warner left, right? But I'm going to give you some background on Chris Warner because we've not got to the success yet because we kind of lose focus on the Bat titles. It's going to be a little different on the Detective Comics titles, but Batman kind of loses focus, right? So Chris Warner, I first saw his art in Doctor Strange, right? So here we have Chris Warner in doing his Doctor Strange art. He did a short art before they canceled the title again. He made it into a split title, right? So then this is, I said he draws good women. He did a good Doctor Strange, like he was following Marshall Rogers, Michael Golden, Paul Smith, and Brett Belvin's, all inked by Terry Austin. So it's the best kind of stuff that you could want to read. So it's kind of hard to follow. And actually, my brother got a Doctor Strange book by him free from Marvel when he visited the Marvel offices. And that was a book that I read a lot. This isn't the one he had, but if we look at this art and we look at this double splash page, like I was like, could he be better than Golden and Marshall Rogers? And maybe even Paul Smith? Like, this guy is pretty good. Like, so I'm not sure. I think I found out afterwards, like, this is the Top Shot has a little Walter Simonson in it. But when I read this story years later, I was just like, wow, the title holds up. It's got a lot of women in the book, some that Roger Stern created with Marshall Rogers. But what I wanted to show you also, to say that also shows some worth to checking out these things, even though this cover's by artists I don't know. It looks like Brett Belvin's, but it says, I guess it's Albert. It says Albert. Oh, maybe it is Brett Belvin's with a different inker, right? So we see Doctor Strange on a stretcher, and we see him fighting his astral form. This was actually, of course, taken for the first Doctor Strange movie. Where we see Stephen Strange being taken in the hospital. He's hurt. We see Morgana, I think Blessings, she goes in there, and Doctor Strange's astral form pops out, right? So this is one of his office workers, this woman here, right? And we have Wong, the other girl, Topaz, that's in there, who's been kind of crazy and bringing different things out of Doctor Strange. So this storyline is like, it's say all over the place, but it's a lot of fun. Like, look at this art here. He's got this kind of wide shot and expanse. I always say kind of the use of wides done right, not like the Secret Wars, but this kind of wide, which is very graphic, almost poster-like. And we're supposed to be talking about Batman, but I just want to show you the fight. So this guy is doing something worthy that they put into the movies, right? So, but is that all? That was him in his humble beginnings. He did Batman. He went and left. We're going to get back to Batman, but I mean, I have to do it. Like, this guy did Aliens versus Predator. Like, He's like, now we have him. He's not a newbie. He's doing this great stuff here for Dark Horse. They have the licensed property, and he's doing an amazing. He's not in the public top of the top artists, but he definitely deserves it, right? So I'm giving him all his kudos, and that's not all. So he's like almost the king of the licensed guys. One of the first things, well, I think this is the second thing he did. He did the Terminator, right? And it would have the same top stuff. I mean, I don't know. I think this almost could be used for storyboards for, right? And keep going. He did The Predator, the first miniseries, which inspired Predator 2, even though it just was Dutch's brother in the story, but he does a gritty sort of, are they in New York? I guess they're in New York, right? But they moved it to LA, right? So it's not, obviously not the same story, but we get to see all of the terrible stuff that happens in the city. And we have Dutch's brother come in there, and we're gonna run into the Predator at some point. But I just want to show you that. I show you that. There's a couple other things I wanted to show you, right? So we also have his creations. He created a whole universe for Dark Horse, right? So one of the major things he worked on was X, and X is like a Batman type of character, a dark vigilante, right? And this is, I can't say anything. There's nothing bad about this stuff. Like, I haven't watched many videos of mine. I haven't said anything about him, I don't think, but he is one of the best out there. I think he's moved into writing, but I think he wrote one of the Predator miniseries, right? So we're gonna finish off just also showing he created more characters. He created Barbed Wire, which he also created Ghosts, which I think Adam Hughes kind of toned down, right? We're not gonna get into that. And he also did art for this Wolfgang. You can see his style in here, right? He does kind of nice stuff you would see Byrne do, where you get to see full body, like Perez and Byrne will kind of give you full body reveals of the characters, either on the cover in the comic book, but then actuality give you wides and close-ups. So it's like kind of, he's just a cool artist. So I show all that to show you, what if we had him doing Batman for 3 years? Like, so him being synonymous with Batman, right? That's why I pointed out this stuff to you. But with that said, what happened? We don't know why he left. Denny O'Neil's not sure. He knew he was running late on his first issue of Batman, meaning he possibly couldn't finish the second issue. So they had Ross Andru cover, and then, to my surprise, says here, Collins is still a writer, and they have Dave Cockrum. Dave Cockrum from X-Men, from Legion of Superheroes, from the Futurians. So I have the Futurians here. Well, I'm too small to show you guys that. So, and then I opened it up. This is like the second issue he did. And Mike DiCarlo is like covering up all my Dave Cockrum. I'm like, what's happening here? So it does have Cockrum's layout, but you couldn't tell that it's him. So I was very sad. So I kind of said my goodbyes to Batman. And I came back. I didn't buy the issue. I didn't know this, but the next team, Denny O'Neil, was still trying to figure it out, right? So while he's trying to figure it out, he puts together a team, right? And should I go to that? No, I'm gonna jump for the team after that. So I'm gonna jump. So when we get to Detective, when Daniel gets on there, he is bringing in the British invasion. They had Alan Davis on Batman and the Outsiders, which was a popular book, and they decided to take Alan Davis and put him on Detective, right? So Mike W. Barr, he wasn't fired, even though he was doing books before this, I think a couple. So he takes over the title. Yeah, he'd done a bunch of Batmans before this, but he takes over the title. He was also a friend of Frank Miller, His Batman early before what's the name is the Dark Knight Batman, or the Batman who kills before the Dark Knight or any other thing that where you seen Batman possibly kill someone. There's some scenes in The Outsiders where Batman, it's life or death situation, he's taking you out. And Alan Davis, even though for they call it cosmic comedy, there's some sort of humor in his stuff. He's one of the premier guys. Well, he became the premier guy when he got to the X books, but he was a part of the British invasion. He worked with Alan Moore, so obviously people would want to work with him. And he did some classic, he could do some dark type of stuff, but there was a hint of humor in his work, right? And he's been doing Batman and the Outsiders for a decent while. I think it's like over a year that he worked on the title. So he's coming over here and he's having fun. And one of the things signature of him, not only that he does great human form, he does great women like that. I think Byrne commented on Excalibur that he draws great babes, right? That's totally true. And but then there's this little tint of humor in there. His Joker is thin as hell. This was a great storyline. I'm not going to show you the whole thing, but he could do the main manor. He do stream wides on the what's that thing on the Batcave. Then there's a tint of humor which people were like, I'm not sure if this kind of works for Batman, right? So, and this would change since Catwoman was like a major part of the book for a while. She would exit. But at the same time, year 2 comes along, so this should be a big hit for DC. I'm not saying it wasn't, but Alan Davis was struggling with, I think I said this before, Alan Davis was struggling that they were changing his art for the stuff that was going on in year 1 as it was coming out. So instead of the gun that Joe Chill possibly had, they changed it to this gun, right? That's here, which is like your average gun. And Alan Davis couldn't get Danny O'Neill on the phone. So he ultimately, when he left, Danny Giordano was like, hey, we'll do anything to keep it stay. But he was already being courted by Chris Claremont, so he left. I'm not going to show you what's that issue? I'm not going to show you the issue that Todd McFarlane had done, but Todd McFarlane does a great Batman. Just to let you know that he's obviously a Batman guy, right? So at the same time, that's why I had the movie in the back. The thing is to capitalize on the movie. Now they have the new Batman #1, which is going to help capitalize on the Batman series. So they're going to make some money, but you still have to get the regular title rolling, right? Because they had these 2 classic titles for Batman, and they hadn't gotten it rolling yet, right? So I'm going to jump back to Batman, right? One of the things that Danny O'Neill announced, this is a while before it, that Jim Starlin and Jim Aparo would be working on the Batman. This cover's obviously by Mike Zeck, right? This is one of their more popular storylines. So he finally found his team, right? So he found his team. It was, I'm guessing, it was rolling, but Danny O'Neill also found, we're getting to the success part, right? So Danny O'Neill also found something to work for his selling of the Batman. I think Superman titles post-Byrne had started doing it too. They started to do branding. They started to make it like special projects. So you would see almost like a mini series, part 1 of 4 or 4 of 4, Batman 10 Nights of the Beast. This has a KG Beast. This is a big storyline. This was how he was able to capitalize on Batman. So you see, as this run, even Nightfall, that they would have this branding on the book. So, and this would happen in both titles. So one of the things, I guess, to kind of keep, I think same for Superman, to get the fans to kind of, because DC was still, had all this buzz in after 86. They still weren't getting the kids in. So when the road to success, they started adding this branding to it. So then at the same time, who was it? They got the okay to kind of do this call-in thing for money. So DC was going to make a ton of money of people calling in on whether they should kill Robin, right? So of course, again, it has the branding title. right? Death in the family. This is, you save Robin or does Robin die? Now the people call in, so it was a double effect. This is a big storyline. The fans are calling in. The only thing that happened was the media picked this story up and said they just killed Robin. They kill your favorite from when you were a child. And there was a big uproar from families. So even though this book was a total success. Now, my personal assessment, I wasn't too keen on DeCarlo Ink and Aparo. It didn't seem to have kind of Aparo's flair, even though he was working since the 70s, right? The early 70s. He was also working at Charlton. So this art wasn't the flair that I was, and the inking that I liked from his stuff on Brave and Bold and the Batman title. So it's kind of like not the Aparo that I grew up on, but it's hugely popular, right? And so at the same time, the movie happens, right? So we had this problem with Robin. The movie happens, and what are they going to do? So Denny O'Neil's pretty smart. With the movie happening and the success of the movie is rolling, he and Sam Hamm they're already saying the script for Batman is impeccable. We read some of the stuff that's unpublished, and they like that stuff. So Denny O'Neil decided to get to the 600th issue of Batman, kind of bring in the the screenwriter. And I'm pretty sure this has been, I guess Harlan Ellison is someone who was a novelist and wrote stuff for films. This is, I think he wrote, obviously I said he wrote for DC, but this had the biggest buzz, right? So we had Sam Hamm, we had the great artists, Dennis Cohen and Dick Giordano inking, right? The cover is inked by Kelly Jones, known as Malcolm Jones at this point. And this was a really nice storyline, right? So at the same time, this nice art, dark stuff, and I think the story is about Batman being incapacitated during the storyline. He gets kind of help, and he kind of overuses that help, overextends it. So this is a great way to get to 600, having the actual guy from the movie, and great art that didn't stay, but that wouldn't be a huge problem for Batman during this period, because they also had the British invasion of Alan Grant and Norm, Breyfogle, right? So let's go to, but then they still had to fix Robin, right? So they had this happen, and at the same time the movie happens. At long last, nope, that's the wrong one. Byrne, who has worked with Denny O'Neil a lot at Marvel, he finally got Byrne to do a Batman story. Byrne is a big fan of Batman. He's one of his favorite characters. And of course, as I said, you have the branding, the many deaths of the Batman. We have Aparo and DeCarlo. Now, for some reason, this one, I don't know, I wouldn't say that's because Byrne's writing, but I think there's a little more flair to what was going on here for some strange reason. And kind of, I don't know, they say Byrne is pretty direct in his plots. So I think he may have written Phil's script, but basically there's no dialogue in this. So DC also, so this coming out at the same time as the movie, DC's also pointing out that there's no dialogue. This is one of the early, I guess you had G.I. Joe, but this was a silent comic book, right? So we have them going around, and Byrne said, if I knew that Jim Aparo was drawing it, I wouldn't put the one line I put in there. So yeah, for some reason, let's see, do I see the inker in here yet? This is a really good story, exciting story. See the people coming in here. See someone gonna try to look to see who he is, and the surgeon's trying to keep Batman alive, but he dies. Right? It's sad. We see a reporter trying to get in there, right, and paying for it. Like, open up, and they have the Batman's dead, and it gets to pictures are sold, and criminals are upset, right? We see Dick Grayson upset and sad. And then we see obviously Alfred. So this was a really fun story. And then when they tell Commissioner Gordon is at this thing, he rushes down and he tells everyone to get out. That's the only words that are in here. And he sees who this Batman is, right? And we see another Batman on this thing, and you see a piece of the mask, right? So this was coming out at the same time in the movie. They got burned. They got supposed to show you the Alan Grant team, but I guess I could do that later, right? So now they got the buzz, they got the branding, they got the writer, they got to fix Robin, right? So now this is the interesting part. They get Marv Wolfman to come on here. Now, Marv Wolfman was having his struggles when he was working on Superman. He was saying, and on the Titans, he was saying he was going through a writer's block. But then there was a buzz around his Titans when Perez had exited and came back and then exited with Tom Grummett. But then they're like, we're going to fix it, right? We're going to go through a storyline. We'll go flashbacks of this, and we're going to try to fix Batman, who's going really dark without a Robin, saying that Batman kind of needs a Robin. But once again, year one, it was already branded, so that was kind of the daddy of the branding of Batman stories. So of course they're going to brand year three. Now this one is drawn by one of my favorite artists, Pat Broderick, right? He didn't, in my mind, seem like a Batman artist, but he's a favorite, so it was cool to have him here, right? And you see Batman kind of pushing himself too hard in the storyline. And we get to the hint going to flashbacks of Robin's storyline, right? The Graysons seeing their parents die, right? And then the Batman coming in and taking in Robin. And they kind of updated it so you can kind of immediately he goes to this orphanage and whatnot. So as the storyline progresses, they hint to the past of Robin, but they're, oh, sorry. I should have not done that. So it's your classic kind of A and B plot, right? Where we have Batman and Nightwing kind of trying to say how far he's gone, dark he's gotten, and trying to pull him out of this struggle since Jason has died, right? So they're going through this. So they have also plan. So they're gonna obviously this is gonna be huge sales for DC, which it was. And at the same time, they do a crossover with the Titans, which is Lonely Place of Dying, right? So for year one, Pat Broderick wanted year three. Pat Broderick wanted to draw the covers, but Perez, obviously fan favorite, did the covers, and then he co-wrote the storyline. So Pat Broderick is going us back to the original team, and this is going to get you to Tim Drake. So Marv stayed on for a little while. George Perez co-plotted these stories, great covers, and we see Robin and this other kid who's Tim Drake, who kind of comes out of nowhere, and he's been kind of following Batman, and that leads us to ultimately Tim Drake being Robin, and they kind of calm Batman down, right? So we did it. That's how we got to Batman being a success again. So what they did, because they didn't have it all put together, and see how far we had to get to with the Batman storylines. Oh man. Oh, that's the other thing I can say to you, right? So from issue 408, this is issue 442. So it's almost like 3 years of trying to get Batman. And we have obviously hot sales with these kind of talents and this branding that I'm talking about, the Lonely Place of Dying. You can see that. And they also created a problem themselves getting rid of Robin. They gave us a new Robin, right? So Nightwing can totally be there. So Jason Todd was kind of ruined. And they also on the other title we had, but I have to show you this. So give me a second. So for my last thing, we have John Wagner, Alan Grant, and Breyfogle, right? These guys are, well, Two of them are, the writers are part of the British invasion. And we have Breyfogle, who was kind of a Marvel journeyman. He did the Marvel Fanfare, the Captain America. You could see he was going to be a great artist, but I don't know why they didn't use him at Marvel. So we have who's that guy? We have Chris Warner, and we also have Norm Breyfogle, R.I.P., who passed. He's a great artist. If we look at his sort of thing, he kind of had some stylized, like sort of Sienkiewicz kind of, not the necessarily same layouts, but sort of illustrative layouts. But he also did a great Batman, right? So some nice stylized stuff, a little bit of Neal Adams in the paneling, but his storytelling wise, he always kind of makes it work. Like if you look at how the panels sort of flow, it's kind of Batman coming, I don't know if you'll see the hand, but Batman kind of coming here, there, and then you see them walking this way, and then we see this guy here, and the gunshots go to the other way. So yeah, there's this kind of not necessarily, I guess it has a little bit of what McFarlane was doing, but in his own way, like the cape almost being alive, but it's done in his own way. Batman kind of gets captured in all black in shots. So yeah, I think I have a ton of these. And if you go overseas, you go to Paris, maybe London also, you go to a comic book store, they don't have Batman Chronicles from the 40s. The Batman Chronicles is this period. This stuff is their Batman Chronicles. The same with Superman. The Superman Chronicles are Byrne books, right? So this is a classic art team. So Denny figured it out. They also started putting branding on their storylines. They had the Mud Pack thing. There's a few others. And then I don't know that they stayed on throughout, what's that thing called? I think Chuck Dixon takes over with great artist Graham Nolan. But Doug Moench comes back. But he's with the sales, and obviously Batman, X-Men are selling like crazy. But they were saying kids are coming in and buying Batman books because they wanted something Batman. And then they also came in for X-Men books and Marvel books. But Denny had kind of figured it out. He kind of started branding his books. He had his core writers on the books. After Marvel leaves, Doug Moench comes back, as I said. So he figured it out. But it took about 3 years, where the Superman titles, once Byrne got to #1, I think the title that was struggling a bit was Adventures of Superman, because of the direction Marvel was taking. But Byrne took that over, and before he left, it seemed like they were going to have a decent nucleus. So in reverse, they were successful. Then they had to struggle and figure out their way to go after Byrne. So they did a little branding. They figured it out, and they added Louise Simonson, and of course they did before Batman, they did the Death of Superman. So there we go. This is how Batman, of course, was a success with the Dark Knight in year 1, but I just want to say it was kind of a rocky road. So a lot of time when people think of post that, they're like, hey, all they had to do with Superman was do what the Batman titles did. And you see, the Batman titles kind of had this period where Denny O'Neil was trying different things. The special books were just selling like hotcakes that they were doing. So they had a bunch of things that they were doing, even the graphic novels that were planned. So, and of course been used later by Grant Morrison. So that's it. Ultimately, that's the CN editor kind of pieced it together where I had left, and then I came back for this Alan Grant stuff, which this art was amazing. I mainly bought it for the art, and I read some of the stories, but it was just a book I routinely bought. And then I started to come back. I came back only one, as I said, one issue of the KGBs, but then the Death in the Family, of course, the Burns storyline. But I was trying to stay with it, and I didn't get back to Batman until Kelly Jones was on it. But there you go, almost 3 years to give Batman a success after the initial big success of '86. So I would definitely say check